So, I'd like to talk to you a few minutes about the name of the one true God, or more specifically, the loss of the name of the one true God. If you look in Strong's Concordance, you'll find the name Jehovah, and it's number 3068. And I'd like to first talk about, the origins of this name. And it is a Latin origin, and this name came about by taking what's called the Tetragrammaton and inserting the vowel points for another word in there. And now, how did this happen? Well, the Jewish people of old, they considered the name of the one true God as ineffable or unspeakable. And so they had a practice. When they saw the Tetragrammaton, or actually whenever they had text, the Masoretic text, I think is the first one they added vowel points to, they inserted vowel points for another word in there, so it would remind them not to speak the name that they considered ineffable. So what they had the Tetragrammaton, and in Latin that was IHVH, and then they had vowel points for another word, Adonai, and in Hebrew that was Lord. So they had IHVH and they had AOA, and they put those together, and it existed like that in the Hebrew as a reminder not to say the Tetragrammaton, but they put it all together in the Latin Vulgate, and they made it IAHOVAH. So IHVH and AOA, so IAHOVAH, and in English that got from the Latin Vulgate, that got into the King James Version of the Bible a few times as Jehovah. So Jehovah came from the Latin Vulgate, which was an error whenever they translated from the Hebrew. So let's just talk about, where did this name first come up in the Old Testament? You'll find it in Genesis, but as far as the story of it occurring, in Exodus 3:15, it says, "And God said moreover unto Moses, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations." Note that it says, "This is my name forever." And you look and find what name. And what you see there is the Lord instead of the name. So, as it turns out, this name occurs in the Hebrew Old Testament nearly 7,000 times, and there are 49 occurrences of a shortened form of this name, and all these are changed. And so I would like to just kind of go over how this change occurred. And the first point I'd like to talk about is from a Jewish perspective. And there was a Babylonian captivity back in the time of Isaiah and Jeremiah and those guys, and it was like 500, 550 BC, before the time of Jesus. And so the Babylonian captivity, the Babylonians came, Nebuchadnezzar and others came, and they captured the Jewish people. They brought them to Babylon, and the language of the Jewish people was Hebrew. The language of the Babylonian people was Aramaic, and they were closely related. As the Jewish people began to understand, kind of get molded into the Aramaic language, then they kind of took a different meaning of some scriptures. And I would like to read to you just an article from Wikipedia. If you look up Yahweh, you'll find this in there. And it says, "During the Babylonian captivity, the Hebrew language spoken by the Jews was replaced by the Aramaic language of their Babylonian captors, which was closely related to Hebrew, and, while sharing many vocabulary words in common, contained some words that sounded the same or similar, but had other meanings. In Aramaic, the Hebrew word for blaspheme, used in Leviticus 24:16, anyone who blasphemes the name of the one true God must be put to death, carried the meaning pronounce in Aramaic rather than blaspheme. While the Jews began speaking, when the Jews began speaking Aramaic, this verse was understood to mean anyone who pronounces the name of the one true God must be put to death. Since then, observant Jews maintained the custom of not pronouncing the name, but used Adonai for my Lord, instead. During the first few centuries AD, this may have resulted in loss of traditional memory of how to pronounce the name, and it notes except among Samaritans, and it's, as I understand it, there are a group of Samaritans who maintain the pronunciation of this name, and also through study of many scholars, it's agreed upon that the name was actually intended to be pronounced as Yahweh. You know, there was a change, and there's one version of the Bible that I particularly like. It's the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, and it appears that they did their best to give us a good translation. But as I said, there's 7,000 occurrences of this name, and they too changed it all to the Lord. And they went on record here in the To the Reader section in the NRSV. It says, "The use of any proper name of the one and only God, as though there were other gods from whom the one true God had to be distinguished, began to be discontinued from Judaism before the Christian era and is inappropriate for the universal faith of the Christian church." Now, did you get that? It says, the use of any proper name of the one and only God is inappropriate for the universal faith of the Christian church. Now, why would a name that's so specifically given and so often used be inappropriate? In Latin, well, okay, so we've talked about the Jewish tendency to change because they went from a Hebrew to an Aramaic language, and they understood this verse different. They reverenced this name, and so they quit speaking it, quit understanding it. The next thing in history, so that was like 550 before the time of Jesus. If we go to, like, we'll say 200 before the time of Jesus, we have the Greek Septuagint. In the Greek Septuagint, they came to this name these 7,000-ish times, and they replaced it with kurios or theos, which are the Greek words for Lord or God. In the Latin Vulgate, we talked about it earlier, where they came up with the name Jehovah, but generally when it comes upon that name, they use Dominos. Again, it's their word for Lord. The English, there's another interesting thing that came up there. If you look in most translations, these 7,000 occurrences are also the Lord, but there's a new thing given, and that is it's rendered typically in all caps, like capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. And so that's kind of a decoder feature that tells us that that's supposed to represent the name of the one true God. Just real quickly, you know, one thing that I get out of this, I've done some study on the doctrine of the Trinity. I'm not a Trinitarian, and I think that if this name were maintained, if people did understand that there was a specific name of the one and only God, then it would be difficult for people to maintain their belief in the Trinitarian doctrine. So that's just my thought on it. You know, the name was changed. That's a fact. You know, there's no doubt about that. I think that this lends a little more, no one understands the doctrine of the Trinity, but it makes it a little more easy to put across because of the ambiguity of replacing a name with a title. So that's just my 2 cents on it, and I welcome you to do some study. Thanks.